Blackhawks slow start proves costly against the Sabres. I'll go over my full takeaways and Lukas Reichel's standout performance.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Do me a quick favor. Please be sure to hit that like button, comment down below, and most importantly, to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, especially as I'm closing in to reaching my goal of 2,000 subscribers, but I won't be able to reach it without your help. So please make sure to go and hit that button for me, even if you are someone who regularly listens through an audio platform. It's 100% free, will not cost you anything, and really does help me out tremendously. Last but certainly not least, got to let you all know as well that today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. If you're not already a member, go and visit FanDuel.com, create an account, and when you put $5 down, you'll get awarded with $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed with America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone out there had themselves a wonderful weekend. Unfortunately, was not the weekend we were looking for out of our Chicago Blackhawks, is in their lone matchup of the weekend on Saturday at the United Center. Huge opportunity for the Hawks to go above the 500 plateau for not only the first time this season, but quite honestly, the first time that I can remember for this Blackhawks team. I can't tell you the last time they were above 500. They were also, of course, coming off of a rather dominant home opening victory, 4-2 over the San Jose Sharks on Thursday. One of the most dominant performances I've seen from the Blackhawks in the last couple of years. And the cherry on top was that they were going up against a Buffalo Sabres team that had lost 5 of its opening 6 games of the year. So a big-time opportunity for the Hawks in a multitude of different ways. And they kind of shot themselves in the foot in the opening 20 minutes, dug themselves an early 2-0 deficit, and then just weren't able to claw their way all the way back, as UPL in net for the Sabres really was the difference. He had a big-time night, stopping 35 of the 37 shots that the Blackhawks fired in his direction. I also thought Sam Lafferty, Blackhawks legend Sam Lafferty, did a really good job of shutting down the Nick Foligno, Connor Bedard, and Teuvo Teravainen trio, as he was tasked with going up against them for a majority of this game, and I thought he really limited them to mostly one-and-done opportunities. They were standing them up at the blue line and making them dump the puck into the offensive zone and go and win foot races and win board battles, which certainly isn't the strength of that trio. And also, whenever they did get things settled in the offensive zone, I thought they really did a good job of taking away the most dangerous area of the ice, aka the slot. So not a whole lot of high danger opportunities for the Blackhawks top line. Their power play also only had 1 opportunity in this game after drawing 7 penalties in their home opener against the San Jose Sharks. And then whenever they did get quality looks off, UPL was huge in net to go in, pick up a big-time win. Just the second win of the season for the Sabres. Hawks wind up losing this one 4-2, and that drops their record down to 2-3-1 through their opening 6, a big-time opportunity missed to get above the 500 plateau. However, the Blackhawks did do a lot of things right in this game. They outshot the Sabres 37-22, which, to outshoot an opponent by 15, when was the last time we saw the Blackhawks do that? And not only that, they have now outshot their opponent in 3 consecutive games. I cannot neither recall the last time the Blackhawks accomplished that feat, let alone outshot their opponent in back-to-back games. They also led 8-4 in scoring chances at 5-on-5. They won the expected goals for battle, 2.38 to 0.83, and according to Money Puck's Deserve to Win-O-Meter, the Blackhawks would have won that game with those statistics 69.1% of the time compared to just 30.9% of the time for the Sabres. But analytics are not what determines the outcome of hockey games. Sometimes you go up against a red-hot goalie, you do a lot of good things, and you wind up coming out on the wrong side of the final outcome. But what truly did cost the Blackhawks in this game, it was not UPL, it was not the power play only getting one opportunity. It was the lackluster start that the Blackhawks provided right out of the gate. And in my opinion, and head coach Luke Richardson's opinion, as he expressed after the game, it was the Blackhawks' worst period since the opening 20 minutes in Utah to kick off this season. Even though they did outshoot the Sabres 12-9, and probably didn't play as bad as the 2-0 score reflected, they were just way too sleepy on the defensive side of things. First off, they allowed 12 scoring chances at 5-on-5 in that opening period. They lost that battle 12-7. To give up 12 scoring chances at even strength in 20 minutes is not a good look for this Blackhawks defense. Not a good enough job. The rest of the way, they were fine, though. They only gave up 5 scoring chances in the final 40 minutes. They gave up 3 high-danger chances in the opening 20 compared to just 1 the rest of the way. It just wasn't good enough out of the start. And what really pissed me off was the lackluster defense the Blackhawks played on the opening goal of the game. And I had even mentioned on X just moments prior that the Blackhawks needed to tighten things up on the big fella Tage Thompson. Because on his first primetime scoring look of the game, he beat Arvid Soderblom cleanly to the blocker side, by the way, which was a little bit of foreshadowing, but he rang it off the pipe. And I said immediately, the Blackhawks need to do a better job of taking away space for the big fella. Well, they certainly didn't. As just a couple of minutes later, Tyler Bertuzzi and Taylor Hall, with the epitome of puck watching while playing transition defense, literally watched Tage Thompson skate right by them, which created a 3-on-2 rush for the Sabres in the Hawks' defensive zone. The puck gets dropped to Tage Thompson, the most dangerous goal scorer this team has, in the most dangerous area, the slot, because neither Taylor Hall nor Tyler Bertuzzi took that away from him. What does he go and do? He absolutely rips a howitzer past the blocker of Arvid Soderblom. Why did that happen? Because the Blackhawks didn't take away any space, and because they played lackluster defense in transition, which has been a really good strength of theirs so far this season. Hounding pucks, forcing turnovers, not giving up odd man rushes, not giving the opponent anything easy. It was too easy for the Buffalo Sabres on that opening goal of the game. You cannot give their primetime goal scorer that much space to work out there on the ice. They deserved to allow that goal because Taylor Hall and Tyler Bertuzzi, 2 veterans, might I add, with horrendous defense in transition. Cannot allow that in the opening period, especially on home ice. And then the second goal was kind of just a lucky bounce off of Wyatt Kaiser's skate in front, also hit a Buffalo Sabres skate, but still, the Hawks were not aggressive enough on the defensive side of things. They were not playing their style of defense, and they just weren't able to match the intensity that the Buffalo Sabres provided right from the opening faceoff. And considering how well the Blackhawks fared in the opening 20 minutes against the San Jose Sharks, it was really disappointing to see them get off to that lackluster of a start. However, they did claw their way back to tie this game up 2-2. They never took the lead in this game, but they did manage to tie it 2-2 in the second period, which I'll have more on that here in just a minute. Make sure to stay tuned. But TJ Brodie is what went wrong to give the Sabres this game. Because after the Blackhawks had tied it up, they had gotten momentum back on their side. The United Center crowd was going. And then TJ Brodie throws an absolute muffin in the defensive zone. And that's been my biggest critique of his. Sorry for shaking the laptop, Blackhawks fans. Getting the puck out of harm's way, he gets an F from me in the opening 6 games in terms of that category. And that now marks 4 of the opening 6 in which TJ Brodie has been dreadful. Not only did he have a bad turnover on the game-winning goal, he also took 2 penalties, 2 of the 3 penalties that the Blackhawks took in this game. And Brodie's done a bad job of staying out of the box. It has not been a good start to his Blackhawks tenure. I'm not going to go and completely wipe out TJ Brodie, but he's got to flip the script here in an instant, because for what he's being paid, especially on a 2-year deal, it is very concerning the start that he's gotten off to his Blackhawks tenure. Very disappointing that a veteran addition like him wound up making a brutal turnover, which has been a symptom of his through these opening 6 games, that ultimately winds up leading the difference. But I still say it was the Blackhawks' brutal start that did them in. They basically started this game down 2-0, and even though they are a more competent offensive team than they've had in years past, still feels like they are missing that game-breaking ability offensively other than Connor Bedard. So falling behind 2-0, certainly not a recipe for success for this Blackhawks squad. and is even more disappointing considering what they did in their home opener, and they weren't able to build off of that on home ice at the UC. All right, there are my quick takeaways from the Blackhawks. 4-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres on Saturday. Going to take the first break of today's episode, but when I return, I'll dive into Lukas Reichel's big night and why he needs to continue to be a lineup regular for the Chicago Blackhawks. But first, I need to talk to you all real quick about Indeed. We're all driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, but match with Indeed. And if you need to hire, then you need Indeed, because Indeed is the best hiring and matching platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you hire quality candidates in an instant. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree that Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And one of the things that I personally love about Indeed is that it makes hiring all in one place so simple and so easy, because you can easily skip out on the countless questions or the countless information that they ask from you that still doesn't wind up leading you anywhere. Instead, go and join the more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that currently use Indeed to hire great talent in an instant. And viewers and listeners of this show, you will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility when you check out Indeed.com/lockedon. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon to get a $75 sponsored job credit that'll help get your jobs more visibility. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Real quick, just wanted to say thank you to everyone for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Now for your second listen, make sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the action never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. And you can easily find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description of this video, or simply search on YouTube and wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2. Surprise, surprise, Blackhawks fans. Lukas Reichel, in just his second game of the season, might have been the best player on the ice for the Hawks in their 4-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres on Saturday. After being healthy scratched for the opening 4 games of the year, Reichel, of course, finally made his season debut in the Hawks' home opener against the Sharks, down on the fourth line with Pat Maroon and Craig Smith, which, as I expressed during my preview episode of that matchup, I did not think that was a very good spot for Lukas Reichel to be in. Only wound up playing about 9.5 minutes during his season debut, mostly due to game flow, though, I will say, as I believe there were 10 penalties called in that game. So a lot of man advantage opportunities for both sides, and with Lukas Reichel not being on the second power play unit, that forced him to have a bit of a limited role in the Blackhawks home opener, but he did make some nice plays on the defensive side of things. I thought he had an active stick, did a good job of playing with some good pace, and actually received some praise from Coach Richardson following that game, and that led to Reichel being in the lineup for the second straight contest as the Blackhawks took on the Buffalo Sabres. Was still stuck on the fourth line. However, Andreas Athanasiou was out there with him, which at least that provides some offensive ability and some speed down there on the fourth line, because I really didn't think it made a lot of sense to put Lukas Reichel next to 2 grinders like Pat Maroon and Craig Smith, which, funny enough, wound up working perfectly in this game, but didn't get off to the best start for that trio, as in the first period, Lukas Reichel only played 1 minute and 30 seconds, which really ruffled my feathers. Thought they were going to give him a little bit more of an opportunity after only playing 9 minutes in his first game of the season. No harm, no foul, though. As in the second period, I don't know if it was the minute 30 seconds of ice time that he saw in the opening 20 or what it was, but the 2020 first round pick absolutely flipped the switch in the middle frame, and it was a fourth line takeover at the United Center. Maybe it was the one-time opportunity that Lukas Reichel got early on in that period, a prime-time chance for him to score his first goal of the season. UPL came up with a big save, and we were all like, ugh, God, if only Reichel had scored that thing, that would have been huge. But that might have gotten the kid going, as just a couple of minutes later, Reichel in transition throws a great cross-ice feed. This situation right there perfectly captures what Lukas Reichel can do well. When he was rolling during the end of the 2022-2023 campaign, it was his plays through the neutral zone, the speed that he was providing, his IQ, his recognition, and his playmaking in transition to me that really caught my eye. And that's what we saw on the Hawks' opening goal of the game. Lukas Reichel with the puck through the neutral zone, keeps his head up, and sees Craig Smith open on the other wing, throws it across ice, and Craig's got a lot of room to work with as he enters the offensive zone. What does he do? Goes and fires an absolute snipe past UPL for his first goal of the season. That gets the Blackhawks on the board and cuts their deficit in half. And then, just a couple of moments later, 2 shifts later, to be exact, for this fourth line, Blackhawks keep the play alive in their own zone. Lukas Reichel suddenly has the puck as he's all alone out in front. UPL comes up with a big save, but Craig Smith, Johnny on the spot there to jump on the rebound. In just a blink of an eye, Lukas Reichel has 2 primary assists. Craig Smith has his first 2 goals as a member of the Blackhawks, and they've managed to tie this game up 2-2, only for TJ Brodie to go and blow it a little bit later. But still, Lukas Reichel, this is the type of performance that we know he's capable of. We just need to see it more consistently. And I think part of seeing that more consistently is actually giving him opportunities. And look what happens when you give him opportunities. You give him a second straight game to play, even if it's not with prolific playmakers, this kid can make things happen. Wound up being number 1, leading all Blackhawks players in game score impact when it was said and done. 2 primary assists, 4 shots on goal, 1 hit, in only 8 minutes and 21 seconds of ice time. Let's get this kid some more ice. Golly, and for him to only play, I think it was 3 shifts in that third period, certainly did not understand that when they had produced both of the Blackhawks goals. As I mentioned earlier, Sam Lafferty, the shutdown line for the Sabres, was going up against Connor Bedard all night long. Really would have liked to see, even Lukas Reichel and Craig Smith maybe get an opportunity with a Taylor Hall or a Philip Kurashev or something like that. Would have loved to see them get a little bit more of an opportunity there with the Blackhawks, trailing by a goal in the third period. However, what I really wanted to get to here about Lukas Reichel is the article that Mark Lazarus of The Athletic posted following this game. And a couple of days ago, I mentioned Mark Lazarus of The Athletic, one of the best in the business. Even if he isn't your cup of tea, The Athletic is a must-subscribe. Mark and Scott do phenomenal work, phenomenal insight, a lot of knowledge behind all of their articles and all of their takeaways. And for a guy like Mark Lazarus, with his outreach and his audience, to go and write an article like this, which is basically synonymous with everything I've been preaching here on the show, preaching that to a much larger audience than what I'm able to get to, it was very satisfying, not only to see Lukas Reichel have that performance, but for Mark Lazarus to really say all the things that I've been saying here on the pod the last couple of weeks. And I wanted to be sure to read off, a couple of quotes that Lazarus had in this article that I think a lot of you viewers and listeners who have been tuning into this podcast frequently will think sounds familiar. First off, the title of this article was "Blackhawks are botching Lukas Reichel's development," which I'm not going to go that far. I'm not going to say they're botching it because it's only 6 games into the year, but what I will say is if they continue to healthy scratch Lukas Reichel and use him only on the 4th line, then yes, they are botching Lukas Reichel's development. Here was the first quote that really resonated with me, Blackhawks fans, from Mark's article. Quote, "Look, I'm not here to say the Blackhawks games this season are meaningless, because they're not. But nobody's going to care who won a mid-October game against the Sabres in mid-2024. What matters way more is the development of their young players." Yes, even though the Blackhawks do want to take a step in the right direction, they do want to get better, they do want to get out of the bottom feeding area of the NHL standings, this team still isn't going anywhere. This team doesn't have enough offense to be a Stanley Cup contender, doesn't have enough game changers to really go and hang with the best of the best in this league. Even though they want to get better, we know the long-term goal isn't playoffs or anything. Quite honestly, the long-term goal of this season for the Blackhawks is to figure out what they have. And looking at this NHL roster, there are only a few puzzle pieces, a few guys who actually still might be here when that competition window opens up for this team again in a couple of years down the road. It's why they don't have anything. I've said this time and time again, why they don't need to be playing Pat Maroon every night, why they don't need to be playing Joey Anderson every night, Craig Smith, Ryan Donato. Even though I have expressed my desire to get him back in the lineup, I've always prefaced that at least I understand they're scratching him because they don't have anything tied long-term to him. Well, they might have something long-term to Lukas Reichel, and he should be taking the forefront of their, what's the word I'm looking for? Preferences. You don't have to cater this year around Lukas Reichel, but you have to make sure he's still in the right spot for development because, quite honestly, that still is the name of the game here for the Blackhawks. And Mark is absolutely right. In a couple of years' time, no one is going to be thinking back to, oh, the Blackhawks blew that game to the Buffalo Sabres in mid-October. No, that's not what we're going to be thinking about. No one's going to reflect on this game whatsoever. And Luke Richardson, I have said he's in a tough position because of this, because his job in the locker room is to put the best lineup forward and to win every single game. But at the same point in time, the organization, the front office, I feel like has to come in and at some point say, listen, we got to give this guy more of an opportunity because none of these guys really matter all that much because this season, quite honestly, doesn't matter all that much aside from what Connor Bedard, Alex Vlasic, Wyatt Kaiser, Nolan Allen, and Lukas Reichel do because they could be legitimate puzzle pieces. Next quote from Mark Lazarus. They're talking about Lukas Reichel here, saying he's finding help messages from Brandon Peary and Jeremy Morin, but at least when those guys were getting buried by Joel Quenneville, the Blackhawks were competing for championships. And again, it's just a reminder of where this Blackhawks team is. They are not at that competition stage, so why are we tinkering around with a prospect like it's going to truly make a difference right here, right now, when it's not? The next one from Mark Lazarus, the solution here is clear. Give the kid a run. A long run. Put him in a top 6 role with top 6 line mates because you learn nothing by having him play with grinders. And we've already been through this last year. We saw what Lukas Reichel did down on the fourth line. It didn't work for him. And I don't know if it's the way Luke Richardson goes about his coaching as he was a rugged, defensive-minded defenseman. He probably wants his fourth liners to play with physicality and to be throwing hits and to be working hard along the boards. That is never Lukas Reichel's game. That's not what he was drafted to do. And quite honestly, when you're drafted in the first round, that's not really what you're desired to do anyways. So to put him down with Pat Maroon, and even though things went well with Craig Smith on Saturday, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense because you're never going to have Lukas Reichel in that situation if things wind up working right. The next one here from Mark Lazarus, quote, Nick Foligno brings a lot to Bedard's line, but he's not a top-line player at this stage of his career. Been one of my biggest frustrations all year long about the Blackhawks lineup, and it's not a knock on Nick Foligno. I've said this every single time. Nick Foligno is doing his job by performing well when going up to the top line with Bedard and Teravainen. However, I thought the purpose of this offseason was to get Connor Bedard more help. And yeah, they have done that on the power play, but we have more quality players on this roster now that we should be past the point of Nick Foligno playing on the top line. Whether it's Tyler Bertuzzi, Taylor Hall, Philip Kurashev, or Lukas Reichel, someone more competent, I think, has to be on that line with Connor Bedard. I don't really understand rolling back Nick Foligno in that spot when, again, the goal of this season should be the young players' development. Connor Bedard is obviously the focal point of that. I don't really understand what Luke Richardson's doing there, and I don't understand why he's so reluctant to give Lukas Reichel a true top 6 opportunity because until we give him that, we don't know what he is. And I know there are some people out there saying, we know what Lukas Reichel is. I still don't think we know for sure. He's only 22 years old. He's only played, 75, 80 NHL games? How about we know for sure? And the only way to do that is by giving him a real opportunity, and not just for one game, for a handful of games, for weeks, for months. Let the kid go out there and not be worried about making mistakes because with the way that Luke Richardson is handling him right now, that's what he's going to be doing, especially when he's only getting 8 or 9 minutes of ice time. I just think it's a situation for Lukas Reichel to fail. And another interesting one from Mark Lazarus is when he said, here's an SAT analogy for you. Richardson is to Lukas Reichel as Jeremy Colleton is to Dylan Strome. And a couple of days ago, when I said, it was actually my preview of this matchup against the Sabres, it was time to get Lukas Reichel in, because not only have we been down this path of putting him in the bottom six, we have been down this path with multiple different players. Kirby Dach, Dylan Strome. Why are we still doing this with these kinds of coaches? Why is there not more from the front office going, we need to give these guys legitimate opportunities, because these guys could be something? And look what's happened to Dylan Strome since he's gone to Washington. Turned into their top line center or second line center, playing on the top power play, playing with Ovechkin, had a career year. And why did that happen? Because someone believed in him and someone gave him an opportunity. And I just think it will be such a goddamn shame if, because Lukas Reichel's style doesn't mesh with Luke Richardson's hard-nosed, defensive style of coaching, it would be such a shame that we didn't give Lukas Reichel his true opportunity here in Chicago because of a coach's mentality in a season that, again, quite honestly, doesn't really matter in terms of wins and losses. It just blows my mind that is really happening. Last one I have here is, again, quote, is Reichel at Dylan Strome's level? We don't know. Why don't we find out? Yes, Mark. Everything he said in this article is stuff that I have been preaching on the show for multiple weeks now, and honestly, going back to last season when Lukas Reichel was being slammed into a bottom six only type of role, it was never going to work out, and we've been down this road. Like, I think even Adam Gaudette is a player a couple of years ago who, if he had been given more of a chance, even like a Brendan Perlini, right? Like, I know these guys never wound up working out, but we never gave them opportunities. Dylan Strome, Kirby Dach. Are we really going to make this mistake with Lukas Reichel as well? I would hate for that to happen. And the only way to figure it out is by giving Lukas Reichel a legitimate chance. He has to be in the lineup on a nightly basis. Has to be. Again, because of the situation the Blackhawks are in as a team. This franchise right here, right now, this season, isn't going anywhere. But you know what could give them hope of going somewhere down the road? Is if these young players become game breakers. And Lukas Reichel, we've seen it in blips. We've seen that it is capable. I just think he needs a larger opportunity. If he does succeed, he's going to need a larger opportunity. And for us to know one way or the other what Lukas Reichel is, the only way to find out is by giving him a legitimate role. So Luke Richardson, it's time to give Lukas Reichel a legitimate role. He proved on Saturday that he's worthy of being in this lineup. Certainly worthy of being on the second power play unit. Are you kidding me? Pat Maroon, Craig Smith, Alex Vlasic, and we're sitting here wondering why that second unit hasn't done anything all year long. Give Lukas Reichel a chance. What is the worst thing that can happen? Oh, the second power play unit is still, pardon my language, dog shit? Oh my God, no freaking way. We were already there in the first place. It has really, really frustrated me how Lukas Reichel has handled, how Luke Richardson has handled Lukas Reichel over the last year and a half. And if after this type of performance, again, in just 8 minutes of ice time on Saturday, he's still stuck in a bottom six, non-power play 2 type of role, I don't know if Luke Richardson is ever going to get it. And that would be very, very disappointing to me, again, in a year where the focal point of this team should still be what the prospects are doing, what the future of this organization potentially is doing, and putting all our chips to make sure that their development plan goes as well as possible. Would really like to see this Blackhawks coaching staff do a better job of that with number 73, Lukas Reichel. All right, end of rant. There are my full thoughts on the Lukas Reichel situation. Coming up in just a moment, before I wrap things up on today's show, still have to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. But first, I need to talk to you all about the fine folks over at FanDuel. And to all my NFL fans out there, can now start the season with a big return over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you also happen to place your bets. And Monday Night Football going down here this evening, we got a doubleheader. The Chargers and the Cardinals, they're the 8 p.m. game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Baltimore Ravens, Derrick Henry been running wild this year. They'll kick things off here on Monday night at 7:15 p.m. Central Time. I am going with the Chargers and the Buccaneers parlay. If you want to tail me on that, make sure to go and visit FanDuel.com. And if you're not already a member, create an account and use the promo code. Actually, you don't even got to use the promo code. Excuse me. Just put $5 down after creating an account, and FanDuel is going to bless you with $200 worth of bonus bets that you can use on anything from money lines, point spreads, over-unders, player props, first touchdown scores, and much, much more, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So again, go and visit FanDuel.com, create an account, and when you put $5 down, you'll get $200 worth of bonus bets guaranteed with America's #1 sportsbook. Segment 3, before I wrap things up, do still, of course, have to get into our weekly Mailbag Monday fan segment. And a reminder, I know many of you out there have Blackhawks questions. Be sure to drop them in the comment section down below if you're watching this episode on YouTube right here, right now. If you're listening through an audio platform, can reach out on any one of my social media channels, jump in the DMs to reach out with your question. Can also email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com or visit the community tab on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. First question that I wanted to get to here today comes from Brogan Battle 412, who asked, don't like Foligno getting captain status when he's not close to the same level as the last guy, Jack. Legacy matters here. Why did they do this, and why did it not go to Bedard? Yeah, I will say, I wasn't totally surprised when Nick Foligno got the C. I figured there were two options for the Blackhawks, and it wasn't going to be Connor Bedard. It was either they were going to go with no captain again this year, or they were going to give it to Nick Foligno. But I did think no captain was the more likely option of the two, and the reason behind that was, one, I didn't think it was an absolute need for there to be a captain, because whether it was given to Nick Foligno, whether he had the C on his chest or not, he was going to act as the Blackhawks captain. And by not actually giving it to him, you can still keep that Jonathan Toews type of lineage and legacy until Connor Bedard is ready, because I do feel like it would have been more special if it had gone from Jonathan Toews to Connor Bedard, to potential. We know Jonathan Toews is going to go down as one of the Blackhawks greats. The hope is that Connor Bedard will be one of those as well. It would have been a really cool passing of the torch to go from Jonathan Toews to Connor Bedard. I will say that would have been more special and probably would have been cooler, but at the same point in time, for what Nick Foligno's done since he's come here, he absolutely deserves it. Really has stepped into that leadership role from day one, on and off the ice, has embodied the Blackhawks culture, the city of Chicago, buying into this team, buying into this rebuild, especially when he's at the end of his career, right? He could easily go and be ring chasing, but for him to sign a 2-year extension here in Chicago and to really put his fingerprints all over the rebuild, even when he's not going to see the fruits of his labor. He's not going to be here when the Blackhawks become that contender once again. That's why Nick Foligno gets the C, because he's that type of selfless guy. And you're not going to hear any knocks from me on the leadership or the Blackhawks making that decision to give it to him, because he absolutely does deserve it. And he carries himself the right way. Well-respected leader. And I think is the perfect guy for the job in terms of this temporary situation in the Blackhawks rebuild. We know he's going to give it to Connor eventually. He's also going to be a great guy to teach Connor Bedard the ropes and the ins and outs of being a captain when he's a little bit more naturally inclined to take on that C. So I do think it was a good transition. Maybe it wasn't 100% necessary, but whether you agree or not, Nick Foligno absolutely deserved the C here in Chicago. Next question comes from Lila Gardenbug 93, who asked, can we expect to see playoff hockey with the Ice Hogs this year at least? Can't wait until our Blackhawks reach that point again. Thanks, Jack. I would say yes. Even though it is a very young group for the Ice Hogs, there is no denying the talent they have. Kevin Korchinski, Frank Nazar, Artem Levshinov, Ethan Del Mastro, maybe Nolan Allen, maybe Isaac Phillips, Drew Comesso in net, Colton Dock, Gavin Hayes, Paul Ludwinski, Samuel Savoie. I think it's a young and hungry group, and a lot of guys who are driven to get better, to make it to that next step of their journey, which is the NHL. You know, nothing's handed to any of these kids. I think it's going to be a little bit of an inexperienced group, but I do think just from a talent standpoint, this team's too good to not make the Calder Cup playoffs this year. So yes, certainly think it's possible out of the Rockford Ice Hogs to reach the AHL postseason. Last question that I have comes from Marin Lieberman, who emailed in the podcast and asked, Jack, Tyler Bertuzzi looks awful. I'm starting to get concerned about this deal. Do you feel the same way? So much money for 4 years. I'll tell you what, I know it hasn't been the most ideal start to the year for Tyler Bertuzzi. I'm not nearly as concerned about him as I am about TJ Brodie, right? Tyler Bertuzzi, I think he's going to figure it out and get better as the year progresses. I do even think he's been cycling the puck well. Only 1 goal in 6 games, yes, is disappointing for a guy who's on the top power play and in the top 6, but I'm not ready to write him off or anything. But what I will say is, when the Blackhawks signed him to that 4-year deal, I did not like that 4th year, especially at that cap hit. I would have much more been inclined to give him a 3-year deal. I'm not the one running those meetings. But it wasn't my favorite contract that the Blackhawks gave out this offseason. I do have my concerns there, but again, it's not like in terms of my 1 to 10 meter, how concerned I am, it's probably a 3 or 4 on Tyler Bertuzzi compared to a 7 or 8 here for TJ Brodie. All right, that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcasts, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and find me on X at Jack Bushman 2, but be sure to go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey. That way, you can get all of the latest Blackhawks news and updates.